So Israel, you've been dissecting Trumpism for years now, while literally everyone on TV has been grasping for answers. Long before January 6th, you were calling out the pundits on this and posting about the nexus of white supremacy and Trumpism. Now, literally everything you were saying has come to fruition. You're amazing. But I understand that your insights and warnings were just a smaller part of a deeper message. It's something to do with Friedrich Nietzsche. Care to elaborate?
Well, thank you, Rachel. As always, excellent question. Over the last few days, I've been sitting back and I've been listening to these expert prognosticators give pieces of the problem. It was my intention to lay out an entire Infinity War saga, breaking down nuanced points and finally culminating in this grand narrative, the big end game. But things are moving too fast. I don't have time to do that. I'm gonna just give it to you raw. But I still gotta go back to Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche provides the best philosophical model for analyzing our current sociological condition. In Friedrich Nietzsche's allegory of the madman makes the statement that God is dead. But by God, he means your highest value. He does not mean the omnipotent, omnipresent deity that we think of when we conceptualize the word God. What Nietzsche is talking about is the set of beliefs that we hold that give our values meaning. What Nietzsche is talking about is our belief that there is an objective truth from which our values stem. If your values stem from the belief that science is the ultimate arbiter of truth, then science is your God. If your values stem from the belief that philosophical inquiry using logic and reason is the ultimate arbiter of truth, then philosophy is your God. If you believe that religion is the ultimate arbiter of truth, then whatever religion you believe in, that is your God. So when Nietzsche's madman comes from his hilltop and he comes down in front of the masses of people and he says, God is dead, what he's saying is that you, people, have reached a point where you no longer have religion or science or philosophy to ground your conceptualization of truth. Now, what that means is there is a void. There is now a void. Once society loses faith in those institutions, there is a void. Nietzsche understood that nihilism, in the form of a belief in nothing, an absence of values, is not an actual state of existence. That could never happen. Your mind will not tolerate the vacuum of an absence of value. What's inevitably going to happen is something is going to fill that space. So Nietzsche's madman is not celebrating the idea that God is dead. Nietzsche's madman is warning the people, you have killed God. Now what will you do to replace it? So in Nietzsche's philosophical model, nihilism is not a condition in which we completely lose values and have no values. Nietzsche's nihilism is a condition in which the people lose belief in the concept, the very concept of truth. And once that happens, once people don't believe in truth, then they are susceptible to believing whatever the people in power want them to believe. They are susceptible to being influenced and manipulated by people who want to influence and manipulate them. And these people are people in power. They are authoritarian voices. And this is where the postmodern experiment went wrong. It begins with an extremely valid premise. It starts off by saying that our institutions, our ideals, like justice, like truth, like religion, like government, are not what they seem. We're told they're for us being the masses. But in reality, they are used by the powerful to control the masses. They are an instrument of power. 100% true, postmodernism. But here's the problem. Taken to its extreme, this ideology legitimizes every form of narrative. History, religion, science, philosophy, any narrative that you can think of is false because by definition the narrative is infected with the human impulse to power. Once again, this leads to the existential crisis identified by Nietzsche's madman, a form of valuelessness, a void in human cognitive processing, one that will be filled by something, and more than likely something nefarious. And this is where Trumpism comes into play. And this is why Trumpism can appeal to Lil Wayne, your everyday police officer or FBI agent, politicians, the rich and powerful, the everyday blue-collar working man, religious leaders, and neo-Nazis. Donald Trump is morally bankrupt. That means he has no set of values. He has nothing outside of his own personal interest that drives him. That might seem like a liability. And it is in a normal context. But in a political context, or simply as an infinitely insecure human being, what you need more than anything is approval and validation. This is not a liability, this is the ultimate asset. So if your primary value is white supremacy and neo-Nazism, then your best bet is to support Trump because he doesn't care that that's evil. He just cares about the transaction, the transactional relationship. You give him support, you feed his ego, and he gives you support by bringing you into the mainstream, by supporting some of your major causes in terms of acting against the interests of people of color. If you're a religious person, you can have the President of the United States stand up in front of the world holding a Bible, might be upside down, he might quote a Bible verse, might quote it backwards, wrong, pronounce it wrong, whatever, but the symbol is still there. He's going to say the words religious freedom. He's going to cater towards those interest groups in as much as he feels like it's going to be a benefit to him. If you're an egomaniacal rapper and you feel that you've been excluded from the upper echelons, the elite of the elite, despite your genius, well, by supporting Trump, you get an opportunity to sit at the table with the most powerful man in the world. On the other hand, if you're a rapper and your primary concern is money, money, money,
Money is all I think of.
That's right.
Money.
well, Donald Trump is going to protect the rich and the powerful more than he does anything else. So who cares if he's a gangster, if he's a thug, if he's a killer, if he's a murderer, if he's morally bankrupt? I mean, these are the things that you rap about. These are the things that you say you are. Who more gangster to be president than a real mob boss? Even if we know in reality and actuality that he's a coward and a fraud. If you're a police officer or an FBI agent who feels like the honor and integrity of your profession, of your livelihood, is being threatened because of political and social activists, well, then clearly you have a good reason to be for Donald Trump. If you feel that you are being blamed because of the color of your skin for wrongs that happened in the past that have nothing to do with you, if you feel that you are the victim of reverse discrimination and that there's a tidal wave coming against you of feminism, progressivism, diversity, equality, social justice, multiculturalism, globalism, pluralism, well, guess what? If you see yourself as already being in the driver's seat, then you don't see these social conventions as social progress. You see these social conventions through a postmodern lens. You see them as instruments of power used by the weak against the strong. That is to say, by the disenfranchised against the privileged, by the disempowered against the empowered. In Nietzschean terms, this is the slave morality versus the master morality. And in a sense, you'd be right. Values are social tools. They're instruments used to balance the equation of power. Nietzsche, you are a genius. If you see it through an economic lens, it's the poor against the rich. If you look at it through the lens of gender, then it's women against men. If you look at it through the lens of race, then it's black against white. Nietzsche, you're killing them. If you look at it through a political lens, it's conservatism versus progressivism. If you view yourself as the victim of a progressive agenda, we'll definitely support the guy who says, make America great again, as in, let's go back to the past when none of those things were valued. And in fact, progressive values were being fought against vigorously. So at core, the problem isn't just race. Race is one major element of it in the context of the American social political system. The major issue pressing on society right now is threefold. It's identity, it's truth, and it's the exploitation of the two by people in power. In this particular case, the worst possible person, a sociopath, who is the most powerful man in the world. And if all you want is political power, all you want is to feel like you're someone important and have influence, well, the most transactional man on the planet is definitely the man to support. All you have to do is be a sycophant, support him in anything that he says, does, wants, desires, and he'll let you suckle at his teat. It's not illogical. It's perfectly logical. People who are brainwashed by cults, people who are radicalized by radical ideologies, these are dangerous things. But I want to make a particular case that the insidiousness of the enemy that is white supremacy is so insipid. It has to be addressed separately from all of those other ideological pitfalls. In addition to asking ourselves, how do we stop an ideological foe whose ideology is impervious to the truth, we need to ask ourselves an even deeper question. And that question is one of introspection. Because many times asking someone to believe the truth and act accordingly is asking someone to act against their own self-interest, inasmuch as they define themselves according to a self-crafted narrative. I would propose that no one will act against their self-interest unless they redefine what they mean by self. It's easy for a lot of us to say how bad and evil Trump is, or Trumpism, because our identities aren't on the line. Our identities are not facing an existential crisis. In order to understand this mind state, you have to imagine yourself in a position where that which you identify with most is at stake, and the truth is at odds with what you perceive to be your self-interest. The question is, how would you act in that situation? And what could convince you to change your position? And that's what I'll do next.